Dr. Miller with a book review here for you. I always want to be like a disc jockey. You guys know what those are. You're probably too young. Some of you. Your WKOP coming at you from the great state of Oklahoma. I got a book review. This one is a different one, but there's a whole genre of these type of books. And let me just tell you the book first. It's called The Third Plate. It's an older book. Somebody may write it by Dan Barber. It's one of these books that's in the vein of like Food Inc. and Forks Over Knives and the Game Changers kind of documentary, and just this whole thing about food. And before I review the book, let me offer this up as a qualifier so you know where I'm coming from. I think it's important when you read these books, and when you read anything really, is to acknowledge a bias, right? One of the things that bothers me about these books and media is like Food Inc. is an incredibly biased video. And I'm not disagreeing that there's some things in there that aren't true, supported, or we'll say true, but there's a lot of emotional appeal in that movie. There's a lot of disregard for some of the modern food industry that I think is incorrect. I think it's incorrect only because it's just so heavily biased in one direction. If you watch any of these movies, Forks Over Knives, what's the other one? I haven't seen What the Health. I think it's all about the same. What was the other one? I can't remember it now. I've watched Game Changers. There's a bias to all these. And while there's some truth in these shows, these movies, these docudrama, docu-entertainments, you have to be able to critically think through some of these and go back and check the references, just like you'd read a book and like, I don't know about that. Let me check that out. So my bias, I hope, and there's no such thing as neutrality, guys. There isn't. To say, well, I'm just neutral. You have a view on something, okay? Now, I'm trying to be as open-minded, though, as possible when it comes to any of these things. And I think what that leads to is some careful thinking about some of these issues related to food. Like, what is veganism the way to go? Is a plants and based diet the only way to go? Is fruits and vegetables the only way to go? And I think it comes down to an individual preference. I think you can have a healthy omnivore diet. I think you can, obviously, you need to eat as much fruits and vegetables as possible. If there is an eraser of bad health decisions in this world, it is fruits and vegetables when it comes to diet, hands down. There's no doubt about it. So there's some truth in these vegan-based shows. But to say all protein is bad, it's a little bit, it's casting a big net and painting with a really broad brush. That's where I'd have some disagreements. But is there some truth in those shows? Sure. Is there some truth in these books? Is there some truth in Food Inc.? Of course there is. There's some real concern, and Food Inc. raised people's awareness to food quality, and that's what I've seen over and over again. If you've read if you've watched my video on Dr. Nestle's book, not the company, but Dr. Nestle and her book What to Eat. It's an older book. It is a great book, great. Great books are like classic books, but it's a good book on the topic, which is, basic nutrition, and thinking kind of critically about it, and not just saying this is bad or good and just classifying things and leaving them, but kind of understanding there's a sliding scale, and it depends on the individual. It depends on what we're talking about. Again, veganism could be a really good choice for somebody, but for the majority of people, it's not. It's a fringe diet. Could it be done in athletes? Sure, but it depends on what the athlete did before and what they're doing while consuming the plant-based diet and how much protein you can tolerate. And so I'm not against veganism. I'm not for veganism. It's just a tool. It's the same way that you could ask me about a sets and repetition scheme and say, well, is this good or bad? And I'd say, well, it depends on what are you using it for. Okay. And so I think having that a little bit more of a balanced mindset, knowing that I'm a little bit more biased towards an omnivore type of approach, and I sit somewhere in the middle, depending on the issue, right? Between the industrial food complex and this idea of going completely organic, right? And so I say all that. Sorry, I'm stuttering around here. I'm trying to be open-minded to anything that might come down the pipe. But I've seen such a heavy, everything, we tend to go in, humans like to go in ditches, right? We go to one ditch and then we go to the other one. Modernity has pushed taste and this is one thing about the book I really enjoyed thinking about, right? Is push taste and quality of food into the gutter at the expense, push that as expense for the reward of efficiency. So, look at modernity in general. And I just released another video. I've been thinking a lot about this, obviously, about modernity and physical activity, right? And our efficiency has pushed so much out of the world, so much of the beauty of the world, so much of the amazing things that happen in our world has pushed it to the edges, and all about efficiency and sometimes safety. And this is the issue. I think that happens in food as well. And the problem is that because a lot of people have recognized that push in modernity, now we want to ricochet and go the other side and say only ancient this, only heirloom that's, right? We don't even know what a tomato is anymore. That anyway has been so many times it's been cross-pollinated. So that's the point, is that I think it's a logical fallacy to say the middle is always right, but it's going to depend on the issue, but I think you can take take pieces from both worlds is what I'm getting at. Okay, we can move away from the industrial food complex and get back food quality, which in turn will help people to stop eating so much. If you eat some quality food, it's more satisfying. It really is. And it's probably got more food density to it, and it's going to have more fiber and high quality things in it that we usually fortify it for now in the age of efficiency. On the other side, you still got to feed a lot of people. You still got to feed people. And, we don't want to go back to the time when people were starving. Okay, now we fixed that with the green movement of and this book does a good job talking about this way, by the way, we fended off of hunger, but we replaced it with an unhealthy metabolism. We replaced it with obesity. So obviously we got to pull it back into whatever the middle is. We can use technology. We can use some of the good things about the food complex, the industrial food complex. And then we can restore, though, a little bit, move back towards food quality, good tasting food, give up some of that efficiency. Right, and in turn, we'll actually gain efficiency and gain better health. Think about the healthcare costs that would be saved by, you might say, well, we'll lose some money in the food industry. Yeah, but you'll gain it back in not having healthcare costs and medications. Okay, and so it's a trade-off. All right, so I say all that just as a backdrop. I'm neither into this whole movement of all these docudrama, docu-entertainment things. I haven't, using a nutrition, I haven't drank all the Kool-Aid on this stuff. But I do think there's some really good points in these books that should be taken to heart. And when looking at the book, The Third Plate, it's written by a chef who has a farm to table type of situation, where he's growing things organically. He's trying to get in touch with the land, and the book kind of chronicles his journeys, with some of these different approaches, whether that's fargois, or if you know what that is, I had heard it in some cooking shows, but I wasn't as familiar with it. Fatty goose liver or duck liver. But just how do we cultivate these things? Because he's a chef. How do we cultivate these high quality foods, but do it in a way that makes sense ecologically and environmentally? Again, I'm going to just put my cards on the table here. I don't like the modern environmental movement. I think it's so politically. It's just political. But do I think we need to do more for the planet? Do I think we need to do more to be responsible with this creation? Absolutely. 100%. But unfortunately, what it turns people off, it's because this highly politicized, and I know it's got to be politicized to some degree, but it's become absurd. The modern environmental movement's absurd. Okay, and I'm sorry if you're part of it, but it's completely absurd. What isn't absurd, though, is looking at how can we do things better to help the planet. I don't think dumping a bunch of nitrates in the Mississippi River is a good idea either. I think we can, and people are, reforming farming methods. That's some of this book as well. I think those are great things. Again, it's going to lead to better food. And this book does a nice job of I think the author clearly has some biases, but he does a really good job of trying to have an even hand towards things. And even towards the book, he talks about cross-pollinating, like wheat, different types of wheat, and making his own wheat. So using things, using a basically a man-made or an artificial cross-pollination, but using the plants to cross-pollinate, and then finding the best ones through basically natural selection of which one's better, which one is more hardy, which one has better flavor, which one has more protein. I think the author does a really nice job. I wasn't, whenever I read these food books or listen to these food books, the bias is oftentimes so strong, like I saw in the Food Inc. documentary, that it just completely dismisses any sort of, the documentary did anyway, dismisses the other argument. And in any argument, you should take both sides into account. And many times you'll find some common ground and some benefit to both of the arguments. And I think this book does a fairly good job of that, of being even-handed, to say, hey, yes, let's go back to the old farming methods. Let's go do this, but maybe there's some unintended consequences to that people haven't thought about, right? And in selecting certain foods, well, you make it so now you've changed the ecology because only farmers are only going to grow that, even if it is organic. But this is pointed out in the book. What it comes back to is what modernity again has stripped away in efficiency and reductionism. can be restored by bringing, and this word's going to sound so so hippie-ish. And if you're hippie, I'm stealing your word. Bringing harmony back to things, right? The creation works in harmony, right? And the book does a really nice job of tying that all together. That good food practices, good farming practices can have a mixture of technology and man's intervention. But taking a step back and saying, well, what are the unintended consequences if we do this? And what's the balance that is brought about by having animals in the land work together, right? And not some weird sort of hippie commune way, but like a legitimate structure. Again, that's what I like to see is like real practical solutions, not like I'm going to live in a commune and only have goats. It's like, well, okay, yeah, but you still got to feed billions of people. I think this book tries to address that issue. And so if you're not interested in farming methods, and probably I'm a little biased because I'm trying to take up my hand to gardening, and I'd love to have a little farm one day, right? So I'm probably biased in my selection of this book. I was interested to read it. Again, it's 2014. It's a pretty old book. Some of you probably, again, you're like, dude, get with it. Like I read this when it came out 8 years ago or 7 years ago? Yeah, 7 years ago now. But if you're not interested in the farming method and where food comes from, and you may not find this book very interesting. But if you're interested in how food is farmed and maybe better ways to do things, and it's from a chef's approach, which he's looking more from chef down. So whatever chefs do will set the stage for what culinary things get popular. And I think that's true. You see it like in car racing or even any sports, right? Whatever the top level does, usually it trickles down to the lower levels. And so, what is a popular food at the highest level eventually will trickle down to, like look at salmon, how popular it became in the last 15 years, across the world, but across the United States, certainly, besides the regions that were already consuming salmon. And that had to do with chefs, right? Chefs can make food popular. And so again, it's a good book. I think if you're interested in farming methods, how to do things better, or if you're just interested where food come from and the quality of food and how low quality our food is and why that is and where it's being done better and how it's being done better, I think you'll find value in this. Again, if you're looking for like a best ways to, lower your cholesterol, this is not the book for you. It's more philosophical and it's a little bit more at the farm level, the, food growing level than it is in the, like you might find in like a RP Diet Book 2.0, which is a great book. It's a practical book how to set up a diet using healthy foods, right? And there's an article I got to do a journal club on it. It's one of the better research articles research studies I had seen, and it was I'm going to butcher some of the details here, but the gist of it was this: is that they took two groups, and they had one group just kind of eat what they've been eating, but then the other group was instructed on healthy foods, and they didn't give them any calorie restrictions. They just said eat these healthy foods. Basically, they gave them a list of healthier foods and told them to eat it. And the individuals who didn't have any caloric restrictions or macro assignments, they just ate healthier foods. Guess what happened? They lost weight. Again, it goes back to this over and over again. The simplest thing I could tell somebody when it comes to diet, if there's one piece of advice besides eat your fruits and vegetables, what kind of plays into this is eat the healthiest food you can afford. Eat the healthiest food you can afford. If you like pizza, if you can afford a cauliflower crust pizza, eat that instead. If you don't like fruit, or there's a certain fruit that's never in season or in short season, and otherwise it's too expensive, then don't buy it when it's not a time you can afford it. Maybe you need to buy bananas at 55 cents a pound then. Well, inflation's been going, who knows what it is now. But right, the point is find the healthy. There's a lot of great choices. That's one thing modernity has done is it's brought a lot of healthier food choices, the price of those down. Now, if you go up the scale, of course, a carrot isn't a carrot. There's the health food store carrot, which will cost you, a lot more money, but it does taste better. So the quality is there. So anyway, I'll quit rambling. Check the book out. I think it's fairly cheap. I don't know what it is on Amazon anymore because it is older. It's an interesting book. It probably isn't for everybody, but if you're interested in that kind of genre of where food comes from, how to get better high quality food, and so on and so forth, you might find it appealing. Microphone's falling down. All right, talk tomorrow. See you in the next one. Like this video if you like it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. See you in the next video.